The opening scene shows Wendellin admiring the surrounding terrain in preparation for exploration. Shortly thereafter, he uses his magic to destroy obstacles around him, creating a flat space for everyone to cultivate. Seeing this, the steward Roderick behind him also orders everyone to start working. Just as Wendellin is about to leave, Roderick stops him and asks him to use magic towards the distant area, causing Wendellin to sigh from exhaustion. The scene changes. Wendellin has now used teleportation magic to return to his home, a large mansion with a medieval style typical of what we often see. Despite the fatigue from working, Wendellin is welcomed by his 4 extremely beautiful wives, who get along so well that it makes others envious. Sitting and resting on the sofa while sipping tea made by Erich, Wendellin begins to talk about his day. Then, familiar memories from 10 years ago start to return. Recalling 10 years earlier, Wendellin was still an office worker with a typical 8-hour workday. At this moment, Wendellin is dragging his tired body home after a tiring day at work. Following that, Wendellin starts cooking a simple meal as usual. Sitting at the table waiting for the rice to cook, Wendellin's eyes tightly closed due to sleepiness. When he opens his eyes, Wendellin sees a plate of food in front of him styled like that of ancient Western nobility. He then sees himself in a metal plate, realizing he is now a 5-year-old child. Wendellin's eyes slowly look around, finding himself at a noble's party, but he still believes he is dreaming. Just as he wants to close his eyes to return to reality, a voice from a middle-aged man wakes him up. As Wendellin is still bewildered, a young man who looks a lot like him approaches from behind and introduces Wendellin to everyone. Wendellin continues to observe his surroundings and has accepted that he has reincarnated into this new and completely unfamiliar world. However, without any fear, Wendellin's current mood is one of enjoyment, having left behind the days of selling himself to capitalism. Afterwards, Wendellin sits next to Erich, eating and hoping to get some information from this older brother of his. Perhaps because he feels Wendellin is just a 5-year-old boy, Erich does not think his younger brother has been reincarnated from Earth. Erich simply smiled and mentioned that they were currently attending the wedding of another brother, Kurt. Erich also said that their father had a tough time choosing a partner for Kurt, but eventually found a suitable girl. Through Erich, Wendellin learned that his current family is genuine nobility. Looking at the design of the party along with the delicious food, Wendellin thought that his family must be very wealthy. Thus, Wendellin became cheerful and began to enjoy the meal, dreaming about a prosperous life ahead. This happy smile was gone by the next morning, at the family's breakfast table, where everything seemed to have changed 180 degrees. It was a normal scene, truly normal, with furniture made from wood that had long since decayed, now covered with a white cloth. The walls around were partly intact and partly crumbling, and the paintings were covered in dust. The food was just a few pieces of very dry bread, which Wendellin found very hard to swallow. At that moment, Wendellin looked towards his father and inquired about Erich. Learning that his brother had gone fishing and had returned, Wendellin immediately ran outside to follow him and talk. After a while, Wendellin's illusions shattered. Their family was indeed nobility, but they were very poor. What he saw the day before was just the family putting on a facade for the world to see, using the best they had to welcome guests at his brother's wedding. Wendellin looked around his home and started to see the servants removing the cloths that hid the family's poverty. Wendellin continued to follow Erich towards the water fountain, wondering to himself that his family, including him, had 3 sons, and surely he still had some rights. Suddenly, a group of Wendellin's brothers appeared, and counting roughly, Wendellin had as many as 7 brothers, and he was the youngest son of this noble family. It took a while for Wendellin to regain his composure, and with the information he gathered, Wendellin had determined his family's position on the map as well as the surrounding areas. Simply put, he was living in a family of about 800 people. Being the 8th child, Wendellin had figured out his life. Suddenly, a sound from afar caught Wendellin's attention, and he saw 3 of his brothers bidding farewell to their mother. It seemed they were going to a faraway place, and it would take a long time for them to return. Wendellin hurried over and learned that the 3 brothers had renounced their inheritance rights and were going out to earn a living. In a poor noble family like theirs, the right to inherit was held by the eldest brother and the backup was the second brother. Erich then bent down, patted Wendellin on the head, and advised him that if he continued to be frivolous, he would suffer when he grew up. After talking for a while, both parties bid farewell, and the brothers went off to seek a new path. Wendellin returned to the family's study and began searching for useful information in the books. However, after a long time, he found nothing of value, which left him extremely disappointed. As Wendellin was about to descend the stairs, he accidentally dropped a crystal ball and a piece of paper next to it. Discovering that it was a magical orb and magical information on the paper, Wendellin thought it was a joke since he did not believe such things existed. But knowing that only 1 in 1,000 people could become a magician, Wendellin thought he would not be the one to possess magic. Yet he did not give up and tried it. After a while, the orb unexpectedly lit up, which shocked Wendellin greatly, and this signal also caught the attention of a handsome, long-haired man in the nearby forest. Wendellin realized he possessed magic, so he quickly searched the study for magic books, but to no avail, even when his father entered. The only information Wendellin received was that his father could not read them. Disappointed, Wendellin went back to gathering wood in the forest, but still did not give up hope. Wendellin tried drawing a magic circle that existed in novels from his previous life. Holding a stick as if it were a magic wand, he began to chant, and surprisingly, nothing happened, just appearing foolish. Suddenly, the figure of the handsome man appeared behind Wendellin, making him very cautious and surprised. The handsome man reassured Wendellin and then introduced himself as a magician. Suddenly, a rock on the cliff below cracked and fell on a wild boar below, which angered the animal and caused it to charge towards them. Terrified, Wendellin turned and fled, but the magician stopped him, then took his hand and directed it towards the wild boar, helping Wendellin stimulate his magic to attack the boar. The spell only knocked it down temporarily. The boar got up and charged at them again. Fear returned to Wendellin, but this time, the handsome magician quickly stepped forward, raised his hand towards the aggressive boar, and cast a powerful wind spell. This spell was so strong that it blew the boar away, its huge body crashing into several tall trees behind it, causing them to fall. Witnessing such a scene, Wendellin was extremely amazed and looked back at the magician behind him. However, the man only smiled gently at Wendellin and introduced himself as Alfred, a former member of the Magic Council in the Kingdom of Blyckroder. The eyes of the two met, with Wendellin only hearing Alfred assure him that he would become a greater magician than him. The scene shifts, and now Wendellin appears at the breakfast table the next day. Sitting with his family, he innocently wonders whether the tea in his cup, looking faintly colored, might be from yesterday. Hearing this, his family is displeased and confirms that it is indeed today's tea. Internally, Wendellin just remarks on the difference, specifically noting the distinction lies in the tea his master had served him in the forest behind his family's castle. Returning to the previous day, after witnessing a display of magical skills and a magical bag containing items his old master brought along, Wendellin was still astounded. When sitting at the tea table, Alfred expressed his desire to pass on his magical knowledge to Wendellin. Hearing this, Wendellin was puzzled and mentioned he had no money. Alfred clarified that he did not seek money but hoped to have a disciple to whom he could impart his magical knowledge. Wendellin, grasping the crucial point, no longer hesitated and quickly addressed Alfred as master, assuring him he would do everything to receive his teaching. The two sat back at the tea table, facing each other, with Alfred hoping Wendellin would keep this matter secret. Seeing the boy's curiosity, Alfred explained that if people knew Wendellin possessed magic, it would destabilize his position in the family's line of succession. Wendellin did not think the position would fall to him and stated he was just the 8th child of the family. Alfred smiled, saying that Wendellin did not understand the value of a magician, which was enough to make him a potential heir. Wendellin returned to reality, looking at his eldest brother sitting sternly next to him. He still remembered his master's warning that revealing his ability now could endanger a child like him in the struggle for power, so Wendellin decided to keep this matter secret. After breakfast, Wendellin took the excuse of going out to find food to meet Alfred. This would also be the first session where Wendellin would be taught about magic. Standing next to a small river, Alfred said that now was the time to search for abilities that suit Wendellin. Seeing the boy still puzzled, Alfred patiently explained that it involved finding a training method to integrate an ability suitable for the amount of mana Wendellin possessed. Hearing this, Wendellin's eyes lit up, and he expressed his curiosity about whether this method would make the mana in his body as strong as Alfred's. Taking this as an agreement, Alfred took Wendellin's hand and told him to start feeling the circulation of mana within his body. Wendellin closed his eyes to feel the flow of mana as Alfred described, and a stream of energy enveloped them both, with Wendellin successfully sensing the mana. Alfred appeared very pleased and stated that the amount of mana stored in a person's body from birth is a limit that cannot be increased. The test just conducted also made Alfred realize that Wendellin's limit of mana was greater than his own. And even without reaching that limit, Wendellin's mana had already surpassed Alfred's. This only confirmed that if Wendellin diligently studied, he would definitely surpass his master in the future. At that moment, in the library of Wendellin's family home, his father was inside when Wendellin's eldest brother entered, apparently seeking their father. The father noticed his eldest son and then turned his attention to the position of the magical orb that had been moved. Wandering along with his eldest son, the father remembered the mess Wendellin had made in the library the day before, along with the mention of using magic, and he burst into laughter. Knowing the reason, the eldest son also laughed along, clearly thinking that Wendellin was somewhere crying because he did not possess mana. Neither of them thought that Wendellin could be special among thousands. However, they would be surprised to know that the child they underestimated was actually using mana and executing simple magic. Alfred had returned and, seeing this, praised Wendellin while holding a basket of newly gathered food. Wendellin modestly said it was because Alfred taught well. Seeing his teacher return with a basket of food, Wendellin was curious. Alfred smiled and said it was an excuse for Wendellin to leave the house, as he had previously mentioned going behind the mountain to find food. Indeed, at dinner that night, the fact that Wendellin brought back a basket of food caught the family's attention. However, they did not ponder much about Wendellin possibly using magic, except for the eldest brother who began to harbor some suspicions. The scene changes, and now Alfred is holding Wendellin as they fly through the sky. Alfred is teaching Wendellin how to use wind magic and sensory magic. Wendellin experiments with combining the two to hunt winged animals. After some explanation, Wendellin tries to channel his mana and sense his surroundings. Shortly after, he detects a bird flying in the distance. Locking onto it, Wendellin uses wind magic on a piece of debris, propelling it straight at the bird, striking it effectively and rendering it incapacitated. Afterward, they both have meat to eat from the bird. Using simple cooking techniques, they grill it over a fire with wasabi, creating a superb dish. Seeing the unusual ingredient, Alfred follows Wendellin's lead and applies it liberally to the meat. Wendellin feels a bit scared as Alfred bites down without showing any reaction to the large amount of wasabi. Alfred continues chatting normally with Wendellin, advising him not to venture deep into that forest, as it contains many dangerous monsters. However, it also harbors many rare herbs, which many people seek for their value, often not returning. Wendellin shares his concerns about his eldest brother, who seems to have been watching him closely and paying significant attention to him lately. Alfred quickly guesses that the eldest brother might suspect Wendellin of using magic, fearing he might lose his position as heir. Wendellin, having no desire for that position, hears Alfred suggest that he should become an adventurer. As Wendellin dreams about a future of traveling freely, he fails to notice Alfred's face turning pale. Black mist emanates from Alfred's hand, indicating he is experiencing intense discomfort. But he only mutters that he needs a little more time. That evening at the dinner table, Wendellin shares his future intention to become an adventurer and plans to leave at the age of 12 to attend an adventurer's academy. While excited about his future, Wendellin's smile fades upon hearing that his family does not have enough money to support his studies there. The next morning, Alfred introduced Wendellin to the vast world around them. First, he pointed out their current location, and then the places Wendellin aspired to visit in the future. However, these places were incredibly far away, so Alfred wanted Wendellin to learn the art of flight first. Once proficient, Wendellin could adjust his speed at will. With that, Alfred embraced Wendellin and gave him a first-hand experience. Wendellin was swiftly lifted into the sky, experiencing an absolute thrill. In a moment, they were amidst the sky, and Wendellin could take in the vastness of the world, almost seeing it as his future, perhaps sensing that his time was limited. The next day, while Wendellin was practicing flying, Alfred announced that tomorrow would be their last lesson. Hearing this, Wendellin lost focus and fell onto the green grass below. His eyes filled with immense disappointment and sadness, he looked at Alfred and expressed his desire to learn more, feeling still inadequate. However, Alfred's eyes turned serious, looking straight at Wendellin and assuring him that he would succeed even without him. Perhaps this was also a farewell Alfred was giving to his student. That evening, Wendellin felt deeply disheartened by this farewell. As he aimlessly stared at his plate of food, a piece of information from his father snapped him back to reality. His father mentioned that spirits, entities with human-like bodies, but icy touch and pale skin, initially retain human reasoning but eventually turn into ferocious undead attacking people, were being spotted in the forest near the castle. This description matched Alfred, and after dinner, Wendellin immediately went to find his master. In the gloomy forest at night, a small figure was desperately speeding deeper into the woods. After tumbling on the ground, Wendellin saw his revered master. Upon seeing him, Wendellin ran to pull Alfred back towards the castle, fearing the deadly encounter with the spirits could be perilous for him. Alfred gently let go of his young disciple's hand and began to confide. Wendellin knew what Alfred was about to say, but he refused to believe that his master could be a malevolent spirit. Alfred admitted that he was indeed a spirit, and because he feared Wendellin would run away at their first meeting, he had lied to him. Alfred also shared his past, explaining that he had ventured into the deep forest with an army to find herbs to save the count's son he served. However, he ultimately exhausted his mana and died. Out of regret, Alfred turned himself into a spirit, hoping to find a disciple to pass on his knowledge accumulated over 30 years. A spirit can pass on peacefully when their wishes are fulfilled. Now that Alfred had found a disciple he truly approved of, he wanted Wendellin to purify him personally. Wendellin shook his head in refusal, arguing that doing so would be akin to personally killing his own master. However, Alfred did not want to become a ferocious undead that harms others. Thus, as a final request, Alfred asked his disciple to perform the purification. After a mental struggle, despite seeing the purification causing Alfred pain, and despite Wendellin wanting to stop multiple times, he eventually overcame this barrier. Wendellin bowed his head in gratitude for the time spent with Alfred, which, although short merely 2 weeks, had been profoundly enriching. Alfred's content smile was his parting gift to Wendellin, a gesture of farewell. When Wendellin completed the purification spell, Alfred disappeared. Surrounded by endless darkness and a void, Wendellin realized that his master had transcended. At that moment, the 5-year-old could only cry loudly, mourning the loss of someone so revered and important to him. In a flash, 7 years had passed, and Wendellin had turned 12 and embarked on his journey to become an adventurer. His goal for this trip was the Adventurers Academy that Alfred had mentioned 7 years ago. At this time, the academy was training returning students and also welcoming new ones for the start of the new semester. In Wendellin's class, the young students were standing up to introduce themselves. The first to speak was a girl with short blue hair named Louis, the daughter of a noble family and also a martial arts master. As Wendellin thought about his 7-year training journey, lacking basic communication skills, a red-haired girl named Inna also stood up to introduce herself. She too was a martial arts master and had received a scholarship due to her exceptional skills in commerce. While Wendellin was deep in thought, he was caught off guard when the teacher called his name to introduce himself. He immediately stood up and introduced himself in one go, but it was not as effective as the others. The best assessment of his introduction was the silence of the others, which did not draw too much attention. The teacher began distributing team registration papers to everyone in the class, aiming to have these future adventurers find suitable teammates, and also as groups to train together in the coming month. Suddenly, it was already lunchtime, and Wendellin sat down at the loneliest corner of the cafeteria with a gloomy expression, holding a plate of steak. He thought about how he was being ostracized due to his lack of basic communication skills. He figured no one wanted to talk to him, and he was also thinking about how to communicate with people. However, unknown to Wendellin, Inna and Louis were observing him, and joining them was a top 3 knight, Erwin, a swordsman also from a noble family. The 3 discussed Wendellin, knowing that he was admitted for his magical talent, which was an extremely rare ability among thousands. Moreover, all the magic teachers had said there was nothing more they could teach him. Thus, Wendellin was considered a highly talented magician. The 3 thought that Wendellin was not talking to anyone because he was assessing whether they were worthy to be his teammates. Grasping the key point, Erwin presented a registration form with his name along with Inna's and Louis's, targeting Wendellin as their final recruit. Erwin confidently stated that as a top swordsman, combined with the top experts in commerce and martial arts, there was no reason not to invite Wendellin to their team. Coincidentally, the Axe Trio also had the same goal as them and wouldn't let Erwin's group recruit Wendellin without a challenge. As they finished speaking, all 3 laughed heartily, a sight that caught Wendellin's eye just as he was about to stand up and express his desire to converse with everyone. Wendellin realized that by speaking up, he would disrupt the jovial atmosphere. In the afternoon class, Wendellin's teacher mentioned that some families were unable to afford the tuition fees, hence students could go hunting and trade their catches for money to cover their expenses. Hearing this, Wendellin recognized that he was not alone in this situation. The teacher also continued by saying that they could form teams to increase efficiency. Seeing everyone else finding suitable teammates made Wendellin feel somewhat left out. On the side, Erwin's group observed, with Inna suggesting they should approach and invite Wendellin. However, Erwin believed that Wendellin was challenging the entire class to see who would prove worthy to be his teammate. Erwin thought that Wendellin did not want any strings attached and needed to be strong. If a group with too many members invited Wendellin, he would surely refuse. If Wendellin had heard this, he would have been furious. In a flash, the groups returned from hunting and gathered at the trading spot. The axe trio thought similarly to Erwin, needing to prove their strength through their catches. Hence, they had a decent hunt and were waiting for Wendellin to return and see. However, Erwin's team had hunted even more than the three of them, and they too were waiting to witness. While Inna, Louis, and Erwin were praising each other, Wendellin returned and walked past them straight to the trading table. Seeing Wendellin return empty-handed puzzled the three. But when a pile of monster carcasses flew out of Wendellin's magical bag, everyone in the hall was astounded. The monster carcasses piled up in a moment, a quantity they surely could not have matched. Seeing this, the axe trio acknowledged their place and moved on, also approaching Erwin's group to offer a reminder. Wendellin, holding a huge bag of money and about to invite everyone for a meal, paused in shock as he realized that everyone had already left behind him. That evening, Inna, Louis, and Erwin sat together and talked. Their fates were similar. Born with exceptional talents, but as secondary heirs, they had lost their inheritance rights. Therefore, they all had to leave and seek their own paths. Louis had been shunned by her brothers because of her abilities, and in the shadows, her brother secretly continued his training. Inna, not reconciled to this situation, let out a scream that startled Erwin. Finally, all three resolved to hunt more monsters to prove themselves worthy of becoming Wendellin's teammates. The next morning, the trio ventured deep into the forest. Inna warned that they might encounter dangerous monsters, but Erwin reassured her. No sooner had he spoken than Inna sensed the monsters around them. The trio was soon surrounded by a new pack of wolves, including an unusually large one. Despite being the top adventurers in their class, they were still only the best among the novices. Facing such a large number of monsters was not feasible, and it wasn't long before the pack overwhelmed them in numbers. When Erwin was injured by a wolf's claw and about to be killed, Wendellin appeared. He had detected the trio from afar using his magical senses and immediately flew to their location, using earth magic to create a barrier around them, which also obliterated the wolf pack. Back in the dormitory, all three apologized to Wendellin for their recklessness. They expressed their desire to prove themselves worthy of joining Wendellin's team. However, they also realized the gap between themselves and Wendellin, and thus spoke of giving up and finding another way. Just as Wendellin was about to explain, their teacher burst in, joyfully announcing that their class would have an audience with Count Blackquarter. Hearing this, the three were excited as this might be an opportunity for change. This excitement was also evident among most of the classmates, except for the axe trio. Recognizing that the Count only wished to meet Wendellin and not the entire class. The three from Wendellin's class knew their presence there was due to their association with him. However, Inna didn't see it that way. She thought they could still seize an opportunity, though deep down, everyone knew the truth. The scene shifted to Wendellin's classmates, who had dressed up and appeared at the Count's party. Count Blackquarter looked surprisingly young, contrary to everyone's expectation of a middle-aged man. Suddenly, while the Count was happily chatting with guests, he turned to look towards the students, specifically at Wendellin. Inna, who was about to introduce herself, was ignored as the Count approached Wendellin, and the axe trio mocked her reaction. Indeed, Count Blackquarter was moving towards Wendellin and, after some pleasantries, requested a private conversation with him. Wendellin happily agreed, but also asked to bring along Inna, Louis, and Erwin, introducing them as his teammates. The three, baffled, followed into the Count's private office. Inside, another person was present. Everyone soon learned that this middle-aged man was the Count's close mage and also Alfred's master, who should technically be regarded as Wendellin's great master. The man, named Baranta, was a skilled mage specializing in detection magic. He could sense that Alfred had sacrificed himself on Wendellin's land and that his disciple had turned into a corpse. Wendellin listened as Baranta deduced that he had been Alfred's disciple. Finally, Baranta inquired about Alfred's feelings before he disappeared. When he learned that Wendellin had purified Alfred, he was delighted and thanked Wendellin for allowing Alfred to pass away peacefully. After the meeting, the group of four finally felt at ease and left the Count's room. They talked among themselves. The three, Erwin's group, confessed they had initially wanted to use Wendellin, and they had given up the idea of becoming his teammates. However, Wendellin just smiled and said he felt the same, simply wanting to bring people along to avoid feeling bored in front of the elders. This remark amused the three, and Wendellin expressed that he genuinely wanted to become their teammate. Following the meeting, Count Blackquarter and the mage approached, with the count revealing that Wendellin had returned Alfred's magical storage bag, which contained many valuable items. After calculating the total, Wendellin was to receive 1,000 gold coins. Everyone was astounded by this sum, and Wendellin was also to inherit Alfred's mansion. In response to seeing the mansion, Wendellin could only remark on its immense size, simply stating, "It's incredibly vast." The next day, Wendellin's group, including Baranta, sat on a spaceship heading to the capital to attend Wendellin's brother Erich's wedding. Until this moment, Inna still wanted to confirm with Wendellin whether they could indeed attend. Meanwhile, Louis was not worried and was trying on outfits for the wedding. Erwin, on the other hand, was not as optimistic. He was terrified and clung to a nearby pole, fearing he might fall at any moment. Only when Baranta assured that the spaceship would not crash did Erwin finally let go of the pole. However, the possibility that the ship could still fall if it were destroyed, for instance, by a dragon attack, remained. No sooner had this been mentioned than dark clouds surrounded the spaceship, and a skeletal dragon appeared. As soon as all the passengers realized that their ship was being targeted by the skeletal dragon, they became terrified and looked to the captain for a solution. Seeing this, a representative from the spaceship stepped forward to reassure that their ship would be safe as it was under the protection of the all-powerful sorcerer, Baranta. Unfortunately, Baranta admitted that his abilities did not include holy magic, hence he could not defeat the skeletal dragon. Seeing the crew's bewildered faces, Baranta confidently introduced Wendellin. Hearing this, Wendellin felt no confidence at all, fundamentally doubting his ability to defeat the dragon. Yet, Baranta believed in him, asserting that if Wendellin were not capable, he would not deserve to be Alfred's disciple. The group then made their way to the spaceship's hatch. Before leaving, Baranta carefully instructed Wendellin, ensuring the ship's safety was his responsibility. Wendellin was to focus on fighting, choosing the right moment to use holy magic. As soon as the hatch opened, Wendellin used flying magic to approach the skeletal dragon. As he came before it, Wendellin was greeted with a barrage of attacks from the dragon. He deployed defensive magic to protect himself while also trying to dodge the attacks. Seeing the ship protected by a magical shield, Wendellin felt somewhat reassured. Regaining his composure, Wendellin flew back towards the skeletal dragon, focusing his mind to use holy magic. After a moment of concentration, Wendellin directed both hands towards the skeletal dragon and released a beam of holy magic. As the holy magic touched the skeletal dragon, it writhed in intense pain but still desperately attacked Wendellin, unable to break through his protective layer. Inside the spacecraft, Wendellin's three teammates rejoiced as Wendellin had defeated the skeletal dragon, while Baranta reminded Wendellin to collect the bones and the magic core as he was still in a daze looking at it. It took a moment for Wendellin to remember the magic bag at his side. Having overcome the danger, the entire spaceship was overjoyed, so they decided to celebrate the victory with a feast. Baranta was surprised to meet an old teammate who was now a well-known merchant in the capital. He looked at Wendellin and praised him, also subtly reminding Wendellin that shopping in the capital might be challenging. The party lasted from the previous evening until dawn the next day, with most people collapsing from exhaustion. When the sun rose, Wendellin's spaceship docked in the capital. Wendellin was greeted by royal knights in a luxurious carriage. Surely, they had heard of Wendellin's defeat of the skeletal dragon, and now wanted to invite him to the royal palace to meet the king and receive a reward. This being Wendellin's first experience of such, he felt quite overwhelmed. Nevertheless, he and the merchant rode together to the royal palace. Indeed, the place was magnificent. Upon entering, Wendellin noticed courtiers looking at him. Particularly, he noticed the white-haired king sitting at the center. Upon seeing him, the merchant accompanying Wendellin knelt down to pay homage, and Wendellin did the same. The king looked at Wendellin, then praised him and offered a fitting reward. Wendellin could accept the title of Baron along with the Dragon Slayer badge, allowing him from then on to break away from his original family lineage to establish a new branch. Wendellin accepted the title and made a vow to the nation. On Erich's side, the group also received this news, and Wendellin's brother was surprised by his younger sibling. After receiving his title, negotiations about the dragon's remains began at the royal court. Currently, the court was divided into two factions, one wanting to buy the dragon for 170,000 gold coins, while the other offered 130,000 gold coins. The argument between the two sides left Wendellin unable to speak. It was only when the Pope stepped in to negotiate a fair price of 150,000 gold coins that balance was restored. The merchant accompanying Wendellin also shared his thoughts about the three factions in the royal court. Those wanting a higher price aimed to attract support. Those advocating for a lower price were considering the royal treasury's interests, and even the Pope had his reasons. In general, their aim was to bring Wendellin under their control. The transaction lasted until dusk that day, and upon exiting the royal palace, the two encountered a young man practicing spear techniques. It was only after the guards took him away that they returned. The next day, Wendellin's group appeared at Erich's wedding, where Wendellin approached and saw the tired faces of three individuals. He learned that the family's gift had not yet been delivered, which was a significant embarrassment for their family. Wendellin also found out that their eldest brother had refused to send the gift, leaving them to manage on their own. Ina and Louis also commented on this behavior, noting that it was disrespectful towards Lord Blackquarter, as Wendellin's side was governed by him, while the bride's side was governed by Count Monzera. This act was as shameful as a count refusing to lend money. Nevertheless, the wedding proceeded smoothly with a lavish gift from Wendellin, taken from the rewards he had received. As the evening faded, the wedding concluded. At that moment, the merchant approached Wendellin and handed him a jar of rice, something Wendellin had long anticipated. Wendellin wanted to use this rice to ferment and cook a dish from his previous life. The group went into the kitchen to work together, from kneading to pressing it down, waiting to extract the fermented liquid. Normally, this process would take up to a year, but thanks to magic, Wendellin obtained the desired ingredients. Wendellin also pondered how fermentation could produce beneficial bacteria and potentially harm humans, a question he had answered in his past life. The next day, Wendellin himself went into the kitchen to cook this soup. When it was served, everyone enjoyed it, and the flavor won over their taste buds. Even Wendellin couldn't help but express his satisfaction with two words. Meanwhile, at the Pope's office, his niece, who resembled a nun and seemed to inherit traits from her grandfather, entered. The Pope mentioned that he had found a suitable fiancé for her, and the fiancé was none other than the protagonist, Wendellin. The scene opens just after the completion of a baptism ceremony held early in the morning at the church where the Pope is active. Wendellin is fortunate to have been honored by the Pope's personal invitation to participate in this sacred ritual. Entering the reception room, Wendellin expresses gratitude to the Pope for the invitation, aware of the sacredness of the ceremony. Wendellin also reciprocates with a small portion of grapes. As they enjoy a pleasant conversation, Elise enters with tea, and both sides politely introduce themselves. Struck by her exceptional beauty, Wendellin is momentarily stunned, which greatly amuses the Pope. Learning that Elise can perform advanced healing magic at her age, Wendellin is astonished. With such beauty, Wendellin guesses that many must pursue her. The Pope agrees and expresses his desire for Elise to live according to her own choices, not forcing her to become a pope like himself, but simply wanting her to live happily. Upon hearing this, Wendellin jokes that he might need to prepare a lot to have a chance with Elise. Of course, it was just a joke, but Wendellin does not realize how seriously the Pope takes this comment. Continuing to laugh foolishly, Wendellin fails to notice the Pope's stern gaze upon him, which makes him stop laughing. Thus, a betrothal between the two 12-year-olds is formed, only waiting for them to turn 15 for Elise to officially become Wendellin's wife. Wendellin never expected that a trip meant to discuss work would lead to finding a future wife. Returning home bewildered, Wendellin finds the Pope and his steward laughing merrily. The Pope seems to be chiding himself for deceiving Wendellin too harshly, using the baptism as a pretext to arrange the betrothal between Wendellin and Elise. However, the steward, worried, asks how they will explain this to Count Blackquarter. Confidently, the Pope replies that the king has authorized it, and even the count must obey the king's decree. At Wendellin's mansion, everyone is happy about his engagement to Elise, except for Wendellin, who is bewildered by his identity as someone from Earth. Wendellin still believes that marriage should be a union of hearts and emotions, and that before proceeding to marriage, the two individuals should truly understand each other. However, his perspective shifts when he hears his brother reveal that he had not even met his wife before their marriage, realizing that the mindset here is completely different from Earth. Wendellin understands that this is how things are in this world. Yet, at the moment, it isn't a matter of concern for Wendellin, who is now disguised as a clown, solely to avoid the household staff's attention and freely experience the town and shop. However, there's always a downside. While his disguise prevents the household staff from recognizing him, it draws curious and discriminating stares from the people around. Though Wendellin is somewhat speechless, Erwin encourages him to stay positive, assuring him that at least he won't be bothered. But as Wendellin steps out of a store, he encounters a young man who had performed with a spear the previous day and who is also one of his servants. Just as Wendellin thinks of a place to hide, the spear-wielding man quickly approaches and recognizes him. Moreover, a glimpse of Wendellin's unique teeth is all it takes for the man to identify him. The man's shout causes the bystanders to recognize Wendellin's true identity, and they all madly rush towards him. The spear-wielding man, seeing this, attempts to perform his duty to stop the crowd, but Wendellin is quicker, using teleportation magic to return Erwin and himself to the mansion. Sitting on a chair, removing his makeup and sighing deeply, Wendellin is visibly exhausted. Seeing this, his brother suggests finding a clever way to dismiss such troublesome people. Wendellin agrees and chooses Erwin for this task, leaving a bewildered Erwin behind as he quickly departs. It takes a moment for Erwin to realize his new role, but he then smiles happily. Meanwhile, Wendellin reappears at the Pope's mansion, possibly due to his overthinking, right in front of the Pope's working room window. Wendellin lies still, praying silently not to be noticed by the Pope. Just as the danger seems to have passed, he hears a voice from behind calling his name. It's Elise. Seeing her, Wendellin grabs her hand, and they escape to the rooftop. Once sure the Pope hasn't noticed, Wendellin turns back to explain to Elise, expressing his desire to meet her to talk. To make their meeting less awkward, Wendellin presents a cake he bought for her earlier in the day. However, upon discovering it was broken, he awkwardly hides it away and gets straight to the point. The sunset is beautiful, and they sit on the roof of the mansion, looking out to sea and enjoying the view. Wendellin asks Elise what she thinks about their marriage. When he learns that Elise is not opposed to him and even thinks that their marriage is a good thing, all of Wendellin's worries disappear. With his spirits lifted, Wendellin returns home feeling very good. Meanwhile, back at Wendellin's mansion, Erwin is proudly boasting about his new status to Inna and Louis. Seeing their jealous faces, Erwin is quite pleased with himself and even offers to speak well of them to Wendellin if they want to become his servants like him. The most enjoyable aspect for Erwin is wanting them to become his juniors. Hearing this, Louis pulls Inna aside to discuss. After a while, Louis decides he does not want to become a junior under Erwin. Instead, he plans with Inna to become Wendellin's concubines so they can openly order Erwin around. Excited by this thought, Louis is very pleased with himself, and just as he finishes speaking, Wendellin returns to the mansion. Seeing this, Louis begins his plan of seduction. Louise, a 12-year-old, dresses in a leopard print body dress with high heels, performing dances she thinks are very seductive. However, in Wendellin's eyes, Louis resembles more of an eel struggling in the mud, basically a fool flailing about. Wendellin pays her no mind and heads to the dining room for dinner at his sister-in-law's call, leaving Louis to continue her wonderful dance performance. Late at night in their bedroom, Inna sees Louis cutting up her newly bought dress and asks why. Excitedly, Louis says she's preparing for her second attempt at seduction. Hearing this, Inna feels a bit helpless, but Louis is full of desire, stating that being Wendellin's concubine is beneficial, as it would allow her to fulfill her dream of opening her own martial arts dojo and gaining family recognition. Encouraged by this, Inna gathers her spirits, telling herself to also make an effort. However, seeing the outfit Louis has prepared for her mostly revealing with little coverage Inna is somewhat uncomfortable. The noisy chatter of the two also reaches the ears of Wendellin in the courtyard below. At that moment, Wendellin receives an invitation from Elise through the steward, inviting him to dinner the following evening. The scene shifts to Elise's mansion, where the two are seated at the dining table enjoying a lavish meal. However, contrary to the grandeur of the food, the atmosphere between them is somewhat somber. Throughout the meal, they only exchange comments about the dishes, their impressions of them, and end with thanks. When Wendellin is about to leave, the steward tactfully suggests that he should bring a gift in return to show he is a courteous person. Wendellin agrees, finding it reasonable, but unexpectedly, the gift turns out to be an engagement ring. In a jewelry store, after some deliberation, Wendellin chooses a simple ring adorned with a magical stone. Although it's somewhat expensive, he is willing to buy it for Elise to show his sincerity. On the carriage ride back to Elise's mansion, She breaks the silence by asking about the ring Wendellin bought her, aware that it is a magical ring, possibly thinking it would make her more useful to him in the future. Wendellin, however, confesses that he did not know it was a magical ring and chose it because it seemed very fitting for Elise. This revelation makes Elise perceive Wendellin in a new light, one she had never seen before. Wendellin then uses magic on the stone, creating a romantic galaxy-like scene filled with stars. While the spell might score low in complexity, its effectiveness in charming is undoubtedly first-rate, as evident by Elise's delighted reaction. Back at the Pope's side, after the meal, he inquires with the steward about his thoughts on Wendellin. The steward admits that it's difficult to assess at this point. Wendellin has something very special. Others in Elise's presence treat her according to her status as a noblewoman. However, Wendellin treats her like an ordinary girl, which might require further observation to truly understand the depth of his character. The scene opens with a trio, Erwin, Inna, and Louis, enjoying a meal and discussing Inna and Louis's plan to charm Inna's beloved husband. Hearing this, Inna excitedly comments that they don't need to rush as their summer holiday is almost over, and they will have more time with Wendellin at the academy. Erwin nods in agreement, noting that Wendellin still has Elise by his side. As soon as Elise's name is mentioned, she enters the room, startling everyone. Elise greets them with a friendly smile and, upon learning that Wendellin is not there, she reveals her purpose, to inquire about what kind of person Wendellin is from the perspectives of Erwin, Inna, and Louis. Meanwhile, Wendellin faces a difficult task from the king, who decides to send him to slay another dragon. Although Wendellin is reluctant, he must accept since he has become a baron and needs to fulfill his duties. The group starts discussing strategies to defeat the dragon in order to claim the territory it occupies, as conquering this land would resolve the capital's food shortage. Despite the plan, Wendellin remains anxious, thinking that just 2 mages are not enough to defeat the dragon. The king reassures him that they still have reinforcements. Just then, a large, muscular man enters, excitedly greeting Baranta, who he recognizes immediately. Seeing Wendellin, the muscular mage named Amber also greets him warmly and praises his exploits. The three then pay their respects to the king and accept the mission to slay the dragon. Had not Baranta confirmed that Armstrong is a genuine mage, Wendellin would have mistaken him for a true martial artist due to his muscular build. The trio then quickly heads to the army camp in the plains occupied by the dragon to discuss tactics before launching their attack. Back at Wendellin's mansion, his brother Erich and the Erwin group also hear this news and discuss it. Erich believes that the king's decision to dispatch nobility to slay the dragon has a purpose: to legally seize that land. Hence, mobilizing soldiers under his command is necessary. If another country were to seize it, the king's side would lose a potential location for increasing food supplies. Moreover, deploying their own soldiers would also reduce the costs they would incur. At this moment, their discussion is interrupted by loud noises from outside. Leading the disturbance is a spear-wielding warrior accompanied by a group of soldiers under Wendellin's command, calling to join the battlefield to exterminate monsters. Upon seeing this, Erich says that Wendellin is currently not present. Hence Erwin is the representative to command these soldiers. Hearing this, Erwin initially refuses, thinking he is not capable, but Erich, along with Inna and Louis, assure him that they will assist. After a day of organizing their troops, they mount their horses and head to the battlefield. Erwin realizes that all the soldiers are eager to contribute vigorously to seize the opportunity for a higher position. While at the camp, Erwin, Inna, and Louis are surprised by the presence of Elise. She says that all the healing mages have been sent to prepare for this battle, and she also inquires about Wendellin's whereabouts. Learning that he is at the front line, Elise is slightly disappointed and returns without meeting him. Meanwhile, at Wendellin's location, the trio now stands before the dragon's cave. Just the tremor from the dragon makes Wendellin extremely cautious. As the cave begins to crack, the trio is on high alert. Soon after, a giant dragon appears. Wendellin is terrified upon seeing it, whereas Armstrong immediately casts combat magic on himself. His body is enveloped in heavy armor, as if a mage has transformed into a knight. Armstrong then charges at the dragon and wrestles with it. Baranta notes that this magic is even more durable than protective magic. Armstrong exerts his full power to subdue the dragon, and seizing the right moment, Wendellin outside also gathers his magic to completion. A powerful spell forms at the center of the dragon, which then explodes and completely finishes it off. Back at Erwin's group, they meet up with Elise, and the four happily have a meal prepared by Wendellin while talking about him. Suddenly, a knight approaches to inform them that Wendellин's group has successfully conquered the ancient dragon, making the four extremely joyful. Turning back to Wendellин's side, after conquering the dragon and collecting its scales, Armstrong remarks that the real danger has just begun. Seeing Wendellin confused, Baranta mentions the reason his master had sacrificed himself, reminding Wendellin about the troops. The slaying of the dragon caused the surrounding monsters to lose their threat, thus they would attack the three of them. The army camp also went into combat readiness to advance to the battlefield. Indeed, the following days saw a continuous stream of wounded soldiers in the camp. The nuns were working hard using holy magic to heal wounds until they depleted their mana. Perhaps only this saintly woman still had the capacity to use healing magic, but even her mana was limited. Healing from afternoon until evening also depleted Elise's mana, but just when she ran out, the ring Wendellin had given her provided mana for her to continue casting spells. Currently, Elise was extremely worried about Wendellin's safety at the front line. However, being comforted by the soldiers, Elise regained her spirit and continued her duties. The healing of the wounded stretched until the next morning. At this point, the saint had exhausted her strength, but was still happy to continue her work. Suddenly, a soldier ran up and announced to everyone that the frontline army had returned with an overwhelming victory. This news brought immense joy and happiness to those at the rear. Elise, excited, ran forward to look for Wendellin. Seeing Wendellin appear behind her unharmed, Elise finally felt at ease and fainted after the ordeals she had undergone. When Elise opened her eyes, it was already the afternoon, and she lay on the green grass next to Wendellin in a very peaceful setting. Wendellin praised what Elise had done at the front line, feeling she was noble and also very happy that they had fought together to the end. As Wendellin was about to get up to fetch some food for Elise, she held his hand and shared her thoughts. She knew Wendellin did not want to become a hero to everyone, but was forced to become a heroic figure in everyone's eyes. At that moment, Armstrong excitedly ran up to inquire about Elise, and Wendellin just learned that Elise was Armstrong's magical niece, simply a mentor-mentee relationship. The scene changes, and now everyone is moving items from Wendellin's mansion to a house in the capital. Erwin curiously opens a painting of Wendellin, indeed very impressive with 2 dragon-slaying medals. Meanwhile, Inna and Louis discuss their plans to become Wendellin's concubines. Just then, Elise appears, causing Inna and Louis to feel a bit uneasy. But their anxiety turns to joy when Elise states that she does not mind if they become Wendellin's concubines. It seems their wish is about to become a reality. After a while, the wedding of another brother of Wendellin was also held. The ultimate goal of the noble families was to form a closer relationship with Wendellin, so they approached Wendellin's brothers to establish family ties. At the same time, Wendellin's brother reminded him about the martial arts tournament that was about to take place, which included events such as sword fighting, spear combat, archery, and martial arts. They suggested that Wendellin participate in the sword fighting competition. Hearing this, Wendellin mentioned that he could use magic to enhance his abilities. Unfortunately, the use of magic was banned in the martial arts tournament every year, which was frustrating for Wendellin. He thought that if there were a competition involving kitchen knives, he would definitely win. The next day, Erwin, Inna, and Louis continued their usual physical training. However, the 2 women seemed more at ease using magic to enhance their strength. After running for a while, Erwin felt exasperated as both were using magic to strengthen themselves, while he had to rely on his own physical strength to keep up. But there was nothing he could do about it. Since Erwin was born without mana, he just had to keep pushing on. The 3 of them saw Wendellin flying overhead, apparently heading to the papal palace to discuss some matters. After the training session, Inna, Louis, and Erwin, along with Baranta, sat on the sofa resting and enjoying some food. Baranta mentioned that the 3 of them would participate in the martial arts tournament, which surprised them all and made them want to decline. However, upon learning that it would affect Wendellin's reputation, both Inna and Louis stood up and started training without using magic enhancement. Even Erwin was reminded by Baranta that if he didn't make an effort, he would be dropped from the team in a few years. Erwin believed that Wendellin would not do that, but Baranta told him that all he needed to do was not become a burden to Wendellin and simply avoid being overconfident. The scene shifted to Wendellin and his group enjoying a meal together. It seemed that white rice combined with seaweed suited everyone's taste. At this time, they also discussed whether Wendellin would indeed participate in the martial arts tournament. Upon hearing this, Wendellin excitedly said that he had agreed to participate to not disgrace himself. Wendellin also mentioned that Elise would join their team, and everyone eagerly agreed. Having an additional healer like Elise was beneficial for their team. Elise expressed regret that there was no suitable category for her to participate in the martial arts tournament with everyone. Hearing this, Erwin's eyes seemed to fill with more determination. Wendellin mentioned that the champion of the previous season would not be participating, thus reducing their immediate challenges, although it was just one less challenge among many. Confidently, Erwin declared that he would win for their team. Right after that meal, Erwin led the team outside for physical training. They trained for many days, from running to pull-ups and even practicing swordsmanship. Wendellin, inexperienced in this discipline, could not keep up physically, and his swordsmanship was clumsy and unstable. Over these days, Inna, Louis, and Erwin remained steadfast in their training, while Wendellin became exhausted and fell ill. Wendellin deeply admired the determination of the three, especially Erwin, who had practiced swordsmanship so diligently that his palms bled. Returning after a tiring day, Erwin collapsed on his bed. Inna and Louis noticed that Erwin's mood had been off ever since they heard that last season's champion was returning at the Emperor's request. They approached Erwin, but he could not muster confidence due to his lack of magical talent. This made Louis extremely angry, and he stormed off, leaving Erwin to ponder alone, looking at the calluses forming on his hands. The next morning, Erwin went to speak with Wendellin to ask if he would be dismissed from the team if he didn't win at the tournament. However, seeing Wendellin asleep from exhaustion and mumbling Elise's name in his sleep, Erwin abandoned the thought. Even hearing that someone as capable as Elise was training fervently to not hinder them made Erwin reconsider his own efforts. He looked Wendellin in the eye and confidently declared that he would bring victory for Wendellin. Afterward, Erwin approached Inna and Louis to apologize for being overly confident in himself, and they continued to train hard for the upcoming tournament. Finally, the day of the martial arts tournament arrived, with Inna, Louis, and Erwin warming up before their matches. Only Wendellin was despondent, knowing he would likely lose in the first match. The announcement for the start of the tournament rang out, and Wendellin's first match began. As he entered the arena, all the cheers were directed towards Wendellin, the Dragon Slayer hero. However, the louder the cheers, the more fearful Wendellin became upon seeing his opponent, Zen, the champion of the previous season. As expected, Wendellin was defeated by Zen in a single blow, returning to the observation area much faster than even Baranta had anticipated. Next were the matches for Inna, Louis, and Erwin. Each easily defeated their opponents and advanced to the semifinals. Inna faced a spearman known for his ferocity and lost, missing her chance to reach the finals. Erwin, after giving his all, defeated his opponent and made it to the finals, where he would face Zen, the previous champion. Before the final match, Erwin and Zen met, which only increased the pressure on Erwin. In the resting room, Erwin was still extremely tense. Inna and Louis came to him and mentioned that he might not have seen the lunchbox that Wendellin had prepared for them. When Erwin opened it, he found a motivational note from Wendellin, which changed his tense mood. Quickly eating a bite, Erwin seemed to have made up his mind about something. The battle that day unfolded, and the outcome was clear to everyone. But after that day, everyone found a suitable mentor for themselves. Notably, Louis's mentor was Armstrong, the muscular mage that Wendellin had encountered before. The scene shifts to Wendellin's family estate, where his eldest brother and father are working on their land, apparently preparing for a new farming season. At this moment, the steward approaches and reports on the taxes collected for the month, warily watching Wendellin's eldest brother. However, the father expresses complete trust, prompting the steward to proceed with his report. Kurt's wife also approaches, informing them that a distant visitor has arrived, bringing a letter about Wendellin. Hearing this name, Kurt becomes visibly upset. In the living room, he initially ignores the letter, so his wife opens it and reads. She is shocked to learn that the letter states Wendellin sacrificed himself while exploring an ancient relic. The scene changes to Wendellin's mansion where, having undergone 3 years of training, he is now 15 and looks remarkably mature. He and his team have become true adventurers. As Wendellin screams for the freedom of adventure, Baranta arrives and assigns them a task to explore a nearby ancient relic. As soon as their mission is set, they head to the relic, guided by a veteran adventurer. However, the king, not wanting Wendellin's team to perish, ensures their guide is Baranta himself. Several veteran adventure teams have previously attempted to explore this relic, but none returned. The question arises why such strong teams have not returned. The only reason seems to be the dragons associated with the relic, making the king's task for Wendellin's team seem particularly fitting. Wendellin is unfazed, but Erwin thinks that if they encounter a real dragon, they would surely be destroyed. Baranta reassures them that their team, called the Five Dragons, plus his use of magic to sense their surroundings, indicates they are in no danger. Louis, meanwhile, notices a gate ahead and the team moves towards it. As the gate opens, the inside reveals nothing but a spell circle in the center. They feel no danger and proceed straight into the spell circle. But just a second later, Baranta senses something is wrong and shouts for everyone to leave. But it is too late. One by one, their figures start to disappear into the void, with Elise being the last to vanish. When Elise opened her eyes, she found herself in a different location. But seeing her companions safe in the distance brought her relief, and she approached them. Baranta observed the surroundings and a sign on a rock wall, recognizing it as a reverse spell formation designed to transport intruders from the first to the deepest level. The only way out was to ascend back to the top. Louis suggested that Wendellin could use teleportation magic, but Wendellin explained that it was impossible without knowing his exact location. Their only option now was to physically make their way upward to the highest level to escape. Immediately deciding, Wendellin's team started their ascent. At the first level, they were greeted by a large number of golems in a plaza. Wendellin was prepared to use magic to eliminate them, but Louis and Erwin stepped forward. They took the lead, urging the mage to conserve magical power in case they encountered a dragon. With minimal assistance from Baranta and Wendellin, the three quickly disposed of many golems. Elise remained in the rear, ready to heal anyone injured by the golems. After a long and exhausting battle, they finally cleared the plaza of golems. Outside, 5 days had passed, and everyone except Elise's grandfather, who remained calm and confident in their safety, believed Wendellin's team had perished. Meanwhile, certain nobles opposed to the pontiff immediately sent letters to Kurt's domain, urging him to succeed Wendellin as the count and align under their control to facilitate easier management and achieve higher positions. Inside the Relic, Wendellin's group continued to fight strenuously against the golems. They took turns in combat, battling wave after wave of monsters, but possibly due to surpassing so many levels, everyone was nearly exhausted. Sitting at a distance, Wendellin and Elise took a rest to recover their magical power. Wendellin, looking worriedly at Elise, advised her not to exert too much energy and to conserve her strength. Touched by his concern, Elise was about to offer Wendellin the same advice when she noticed he had fallen asleep on her shoulder. Thus, Wendellin's team continued to advance through the levels, all utterly exhausted, knowing that if they encountered the final boss, they would hardly have the strength for one last battle. Upon entering the next level, the group was relieved to realize it was the final one. They hoped they might soon escape, but instead, they were greeted by a golem dragon. Before they could recover from their shock, the golem dragon attacked, and Baranta quickly deployed a magic shield to block it. Just when they thought they had finished with the golems, a horde of them emerged from behind, cutting off their retreat. At this point, Wendellin's group had no choice but to fight desperately for a chance to survive and escape the relic. Wendellin joined Baranta to help maintain the magic shield as the golem dragon continued its assault. Realizing that defense alone was not a sustainable strategy, the two decided to use all their remaining magic power for a counterattack. Baranta drained all his magic energy and transferred it to Wendellin, who gathered it all for a final strike. However, Wendellin underestimated the golem dragon, which effortlessly returned a more powerful burst of magic energy, quickly overpowering Wendellin's attack. Desperate, Wendellin was about to apologize to everyone for failing to protect them when Elise, who had been behind him, quickly approached. She then transferred magic power to Wendellin using a kiss, after which she collapsed into his arms, while his attack magnified immensely. In a moment, the golem dragon was utterly defeated, and the other golems stopped their assault. The scene shifts to everyone arriving at the final treasure room, while Wendellin and Elise were lying in a bed, recovering from their depleted magical energy. Meanwhile, Louis was complaining about Inna's attempt to kiss Wendellin, but Erwin called him into the library. Irritated, Louis entered, and soon after, Wendellin and Elise woke up and followed him. They were all astonished and overjoyed to discover a treasure trove of ancient, powerful magical texts and artifacts created by a sorcerer from an ancient era. Perhaps this was the reward for those who successfully conquered the relic. The scene changes at this point, with Wendellin's adventurer group appearing at the royal palace to discuss their reward distribution. According to what their team has brought back, each member is set to receive a reward of 2 million gold coins. Upon hearing this figure, everyone's jaws drop. Not to mention its worth, but just considering it, Probably not even the descendants up to the 18th generation could spend all this money. Naturally, such a large amount of gold would be paid out gradually over 10 years by the royal palace. Returning to his mansion, Armstrong immediately shows up, expressing a bit of regret that Wendellin wants to leave the capital. However, this is understandable, and he also mentions that he will investigate who spread the rumor that Wendellin had died. This had caused a great surprise when Wendellin returned. It was the first time Wendellin heard about this, but he seemed indifferent. The group then began discussing the massive amount of reward money they received. After some agreement, they all decided to entrust the management of it to Wendellin. Hearing this, Wendellin feels slightly overwhelmed by the amount. A total of 10 million gold, not knowing what he would spend it on. Meanwhile, Jacker's group, the head of the corrupt media group who spread the news of Wendellin's death, was meeting together. It seems that Wendellin's survival and return did not overly bother him. Moreover, it was part of his plan. Jacker intended to use this situation to lead to an entirely different plan. On Wendellin's side, while he and his teammates were leisurely enjoying breakfast, a pink-haired girl was watching them from outside the window. Wendellin felt someone's presence, but when he looked out, he saw no one. Afterwards, Wendellin mentioned the need to find someone to manage the mansion in the capital after he leaves. The group suggested finding someone strong, intelligent, capable, and loyal enough for the job. The name that came up in their minds at that moment was Zoderic, so they immediately invited Zoderic to the mansion and made their request. Zoderic was overjoyed and accepted the request immediately, which was also observed by the pink-haired girl. The group also realized this, and after initially ensuring Wendellin's safety, they rushed to the window to check, but she had already run away. Wendellin told the group that there were some things he needed to take care of before leaving the capital. Subsequently, Wendellin and his team head straight to the research institute, which had been constructed in an ancient architectural style. There, Wendellin meets the professor who had purchased the magic formation at the Relic site. As soon as the professor sees Wendellin, he smiles and greets him. Wendellin expresses his request to use the technology derived from the relics, whose sole function is to use magic power to create objects they imagine. Indeed, if such a device fell into the wrong hands, it could certainly cause great turmoil. Wendellin is easily granted permission to use it, even though the device is still in the experimental phase. In a moment of focused imagination, the object that appears in Wendellin's hand is Elise's underwear. Everyone looks at Wendellin and deems him a pervert. Embarrassed, Wendellin then continues to concentrate in order to create what he truly desires. The three female teammates instinctively cover themselves, but this time Wendellin successfully creates the object he intended. The group leaves, pushing a cart covered with cloth, and quickly uses a teleportation spell to depart as soon as they step out of the institute. The pink-haired girl sees everything and approaches the area after Wendellin has completely left, sensing the fragrance. This leads her to think that Wendellin is involved in something dubious. The scene shifts to Wendellin's mansion, where he is organizing a party to thank those he owes gratitude to. Even Armstrong had not anticipated Wendellin's actions before leaving the capital, and his fondness for him grows. At that moment, Wendellin enters with a huge platter of tuna. Seeing the curiosity in everyone's eyes, Wendellin then brings out a special sauce for the raw tuna dish that had been aged for 3 years. Everyone starts enjoying their first slices of tuna, unable to stop praising the exquisite taste of the dish. Zoderic, after identifying the culprit who spread the rumors about Wendellin's death, reports back to him. The culprit is Jacker, the brother of Commissioner Zanish. Wendellin wonders why Jacker would want to harm him unprovoked. Zoderic reveals that he is the son Jacker refuses to acknowledge, fully aware of his nature. It's simply Jacker's way of using Wendellin to get closer to his brother Zanish's commissioner position. Zoderic also mentioned that he had given Jacker a substantial gift, as Jacker had spread false rumors about Wendellin's death. As a result, Zoderic decided to start a rumor that Jacker was largely involved in Wendellin's death. Since it was just a rumor, no one could confirm it, but it could keep Jacker muzzled for a while by the royal family. At that moment, the pink-haired girl appeared at the window, eyeing the delicious food, especially the aromatic tuna dish, and couldn't resist breaking in to get a closer look. Seeing this, Erwin tried to stop her, but was quickly subdued by her. As she approached him, Wendellin felt a bit scared, but her real target turned out to be the plate of tuna next to him. Confused, Wendellin watched as the girl's father, Edgar, stepped forward to explain. He first introduced her as Yuma, whose purpose, similar to the old pope, was to pair her with Wendellin as a married couple. However, Yuma seemed only interested in the food, quickly dismissing Wendellin before heading off with Elise in search of more tuna. Baranta approached and explained that it was hero syndrome, a condition affecting those born with abundant magic power and strength, who however require large amounts of food to sustain. Without beating around the bush, Edgar directly expressed his desire for his daughter to stay beside Wendellin as a bodyguard, even suggesting that Wendellin could marry her, which left Wendellin unable to adapt quickly. After a while, Wendellin stated that he would leave the capital and become a normal adventurer. Hearing this, Edgar looked puzzled towards Count Blackquarter, who had been informed that Wendellin was going monster hunting, not just hunting. The Count then told Wendellin that he had a task for him. The conversation stopped there and returned to the scene at Wendellin's family home, as Kurt's wife was reading a letter announcing that Wendellin had fallen in battle. Furthermore, stating that Kurt was to inherit Wendellin's estate and position. Kurt became overwhelmingly happy. However, he was abruptly awakened from his dream by his wife's scream. Outside the window, Wendellin's fully armed team appeared, looking towards her and Kurt. At this time, Wendellin's group had entered and was discussing with Kurt about the punishment expedition from the year of the Black Quarter in search of the panacea. Although everything was in the past, many of the soldiers sent that year had become corpses, and some even turned into undead, so they wanted to come here to conduct a major purification to liberate the souls of the deceased. However, Kurt was very annoyed by this and demanded that Wendellin's side pay a fee for what they collected at this place. Baranta shared the same idea, and after Kurt inquired about the value that Wendellin would pay him, which was 30% of the collected items, Kurt decided to raise the price to 50%. Behind Wendellin, Erwin had been upset for a long time due to Kurt's disagreeable attitude. He was extremely angry and countered back, with Louis also taking similar action. Moreover, they struck at the core of Kurt's dark heart by stating that Wendellin now holds a higher position than him, leaving Kurt to only tell Wendellin that his family lacks manners. Reluctantly, Wendellin stepped forward to mediate, but internally, he silently assessed his brother as having become a highly disagreeable person over time. That very night, Kurt organized a meeting to address all the concerns of the citizens. Upon hearing the question whether Wendellin would help them purify the dead spirits of their families and also retrieve their relics, Kurt appeared extremely displeased. Meanwhile, Wendellin's group was having dinner at the house of their second eldest brother. Unlike Kurt, this second brother was very amiable. His family warmly welcomed Wendellin's group, and Wendellin also promised his sister-in-law that he would retrieve her grandfather's relic, which delighted her. The next day, Wendellin's team set out deep into the mysterious forest to purify the dead spirits. Finding a suitable location, the group formed a circle and loudly shouted insults at the spirits to draw them towards their area. Although the spirits had lost their rationality, such words could provoke them to rush towards them. Upon the appearance of the spirits, Wendellin and Elise together created a purification barrier. The two combined forces to form a vast barrier. Any spirit that stepped into the area was purified, leaving only their armor. After a while, Inna and Louis busied themselves collecting the pile of armor. When they saw nothing else, they were puzzled as to why there was only that much, when suddenly a sound tearing through the air was heard, and they saw a flying lizard that had turned into a spirit attacking them. Seeing this, Yuma stepped forward to fight, wielding her axe and charging at the flying lizard spirit, delivering a decisive chop. In a moment, its neck was severed and its body was also purified by the holy art. This was followed by a wave of spirit monsters continuously attacking, but the group easily purified them. After a while, the group surveyed the area to see if they had missed any spirits, and then they saw the spirit of Elise's grandfather-in-law. Seeing this, Wendellin and Elise quickly approached, and finding that this spirit still retained some consciousness and even inquired about his granddaughter, Wendellin told him that she was living happily. The spirit smiled contentedly, released his sword, and Elise quickly performed the purification. Thus, their mission was successfully completed, and Wendellin's team collected the relics of the soldiers to return to the people of this domain. Just as they were about to bury them, Kurt appeared from afar demanding that the relics be handed over to the forge to supplement the iron shortage. An old man there argued that since the bodies of their relatives were gone, the armors should be left for burial. While Kurt was refusing, Wendellin approached with a massive block of metal to trade. Kurt, merely annoyed, walked away, planning to collect the armor pile after Wendellin left the area. Subsequently, Wendellin's group proceeded to the mansion of Count Blackquarter to report the completion of their mission. Afterwards, Wendellin mentioned that he could freely leave this place to become an independent adventurer. However, the Count wanted him to stay and rule over his homeland. Seeing Wendellin's refusal, Baranta remarked that Wendellin's homeland was not bad and quite comfortable. The group then returned there to complete the task of returning the relics of more than 2,000 fallen soldiers to their relatives. They also met Wendellin's family's butler, who invited them to participate in the funeral. Elise became the presiding figure of the place as the local nun was old. In the evening, everyone organized a ceremony to commemorate the deceased, with separate areas for eating and mourning. The absence of Kurt displeased the butler, though his wife and children appeared. Out of gratitude, the woman led her 2 children to commemorate those who had died in the battle. Wendellin also met them and had a very enjoyable conversation, especially with his 2 grandchildren who greatly admired him for his glorious achievements. Inna and Louis joined in the cheerful atmosphere and reenacted the battle between Wendellin and the dragon skeleton. Late into the night, the ceremony concluded and everyone went their separate ways, with Wendellin and his team also saying their farewells and departing. However, Wendellin had a private meeting with the butler, who requested that he become the master of this land. Hearing this, Wendellin quickly said that such things should not be spoken in front of his father and Kurt, but the butler expressed that he and the people of the area wanted Wendellin to become the lord of this region, as it would eventually fall apart under Kurt's rule. The butler also knew Wendellin cherished the freedom of being an adventurer, so he suggested that Zoderic could manage in his stead. He would do his utmost to help, and moreover, the royal court also wanted Wendellin to take charge of this land. Hearing this, Wendellin was puzzled. Baranta appeared just in time to explain the situation to Wendellin for better understanding, also repeating what the butler had just told Wendellin. Wendellin and Baranta went to a secluded place to have a private conversation. Baranta mentioned that the king had aggressively expanded the country's territories, but managing them was extremely difficult because the local lords had lived like commoners for many years. Therefore, Wendellin was seen as an excellent candidate for the lordship of this region. However, this plan was highly complex. If the king now forced Kurt to relinquish his position and handed it over to Wendellin, many other lords would have similar concerns. Hence, the king wanted to remove Kurt from this position and Wendellin's father would have to leave this place to rectify Kurt's mistakes. The reason being that Wendellin helped purify the region of undead spirits and was to take over that position. But for Kurt to be ousted, Wendellin's act of purifying the undead spirits, which garnered public support for him, would frighten Kurt into trying to kill Wendellin, thus making Kurt the guilty party. Wendellin also understood why Baranta had not been drinking for the past few days. He needed to stay sober to vigilantly watch those who intended to harm Wendellin. Wendellin wondered just how deep this plan was, but he knew it had been in the making for a long time. This position was one Wendellin had to take, as he had the responsibility to revive this land. The next day, while making candy, they discussed how Wendellin would have to become the lord of this region. Wendellin's teammates had no objections, but Wendellin was greatly troubled by this issue. It wasn't until his sister-in-law brought her 2 children for a visit that Wendellin could temporarily forget about it, while the elder remained in a dark corner, closely observing Wendellin's sister-in-law. In the evening, while Wendellin and his family were having dinner, they were distracted by loud noises outside. Wendellin and his second eldest brother went out to see that it was the people of the region. They expressed their support for Wendellin becoming the lord of the region instead of Kurt. Hearing this, Wendellin's brother mentioned that if Kurt heard this, it would surely be dangerous. But the people were not afraid and replied that they had staked their lives on securing a better future for their descendants. Therefore, they would still choose Wendellin to become the lord of this region. At this point, Wendellin did not know what to do and simply expressed that he had no plans yet. Seeing them start to argue, Wendellin advised them to go home and promised to give an answer soon. Baranta noticed the village elder hiding and observing from a distance. He quickly followed and confronted the village elder, seeing through his plan to support Wendellin and provoke the people to take risks. If Wendellin became the lord, the elder would be treated well by Wendellin. Otherwise, the elder would be fine either way. When spotted, the village elder pretended to be unaware before leaving, only to warn Baranta to be cautious of Wendellin's sister-in-law. On Kurt's side, he was extremely angry upon learning that the people supported Wendellin becoming the lord of the region, and was determined not to let this happen. Meanwhile, Wendellin and his group sat down to discuss becoming lords. Wendellin felt it was a bit troublesome and wondered what would happen to Kurt if he became the lord of this region. Baranta became serious, looked Wendellin in the eye, and stated that Kurt would definitely be eliminated by the royal family. Hearing this, Wendellin's emotions became extremely chaotic. and he was determined not to let this happen. The next morning, Wendellin went to Kurt's mansion to negotiate to avoid casualties. At Kurt's mansion, the two sat face to face. Kurt was extremely angry but remained calm to hear Wendellin's purpose. Wendellin cautiously stated his request to own the undeveloped land in the region. Of course, Kurt would still be the lord of the land, and all basic benefits would remain as long as he handed over the rights to Wendellin upon his retirement. Hearing this, Kurt finally lost his composure and threw the teacup in front of him. He bluntly refused, thinking Wendellin had bad intentions. But when Wendellin tried to explain, Kurt drove him away. Wendellin had to leave and accidentally ran into his sister-in-law. The two went outside to discuss the issue, and Wendellin expressed that he also did not know what to do. Ultimately, he just wanted to avoid any casualties. His sister-in-law expressed that she did not care about anything else, only wanting to protect her children. Helping those close to Wendellin was also a way to protect them. And after that, Wendellin returned home. At this time, the group sat together making cakes, and Wendellin stated that he would become the lord of this region. Hence, he needed everyone's support. Elise said she was always ready to help, which reassured Wendellin somewhat. In the following days, Wendellin and his team organized the trade of goods from the capital at reasonable prices to win over the local people's support. They then targeted Kurt's close associates by offering them excellent conditions. It seemed like Wendellin wanted those around Kurt to leave, forcing his brother to give up the lordship, which infuriated him. However, Wendellin still offered a way out for Kurt. First, he found a suitable house for his sister-in-law and her children to live. Then he found a church where Kurt could repent and also hide his whereabouts from the king with the help of Zoderic. On Kurt's side, because all his supporters had left, he seemed to have become desperate and wanted to find Wendellin to kill him. Suddenly, one of Jacker's henchmen appeared and mocked Kurt for only bringing a knife to kill Wendellin. Realizing his shallow thinking, he gave Kurt a dragon calling horn. This magical item was useful enough to kill Wendellin, making Kurt extremely delighted, holding it as if it were a treasure. The next morning, Wendellin's team appeared in the magical forest, fully equipped to confront Kurt. Baranta, using his sensing magic, only detected Kurt approaching their location. Everyone was still worried about potential reinforcements, but it turned out Kurt was alone. This indicated that he must have had a powerful strategy in mind to face Wendellin. Wendellin then approached Kurt alone, pretending to be unaware of his intentions and started to inquire. However, Kurt, not interested in a lengthy conversation, directly called out Wendellin's teammates who were hiding. Kurt then began to mock Wendellin, stating that despite Wendellin's accomplishments, such as slaying a dragon and becoming the lord of the land, Kurt would kill him that day. Confidently, Kurt pulled out a dragon flute to confront Wendellin and his group. Baranta was shocked to see it and realized that it could summon dragons to aid its user in defeating enemies. Now wondered why they should be afraid since they had already slain a dragon. Yet, to everyone's surprise, the dragon flute could summon an entire swarm of dragons. With such numbers, not just a few people, but even a well-trained army could do little against them. This was precisely why Kurt felt confident and unafraid in his confrontation with Wendellin's group. Hearing this, those behind Wendellin began to criticize Kurt, stating that if he used the dragon flute, the local people and Kurt's own family would all perish. Hearing this, Kurt laughed maniacally, believing that the commoners who betrayed him deserved to die, and it was a small price to pay if his family died. Kurt then shifted his gaze from one filled with hatred to one of joy, thinking that after killing Wendellin, he would take over his title and use it to further strengthen his domain. Wendellin, unconcerned, was just furious that Kurt was willing to sacrifice his own wife and children for fame. As Wendellin was about to cast a spell, Kurt threatened that if he made a move, he would immediately play the flute, making Wendellin hesitate to act rashly. Meanwhile, Baranta was waiting for the right moment, and as soon as Kurt was off guard, he launched a magic attack aimed at destroying the dragon flute. But the attack was blocked by the flute, leaving Kurt unharmed. Smiling triumphantly, Kurt then looked at the crazed crowd and immediately played the flute, hoping to wipe out Wendellin's group completely. Upon seeing this, Wendellin immediately wanted to approach Kurt to stop him, but was restrained by Yuma, who felt that the object had an evil aura. Elise also stepped forward, stating that she sensed a curse in it. It was not a dragon flute, but a cursed flute, a magical artifact capable of summoning spirits of the dead to destroy enemies. The cost of using it was that the user would lose their humanity and become one with the spirit. Ultimately, Kurt was just a pawn of Jacker. Seeing that Kurt had completely transformed and was attacking him, Wendellin stood frozen. Elise quickly moved forward to use her holy magic to block the attack, declaring that she would purify this spirit. However, Elise's power alone was not enough to resist it. When Elise could no longer withstand it, Wendellin snapped back to reality. Perhaps having made up his mind, Wendellin approached Elise and suggested using a wide-scale purification like they had done before with the spirits in the forest. Elise hesitated, but seeing Wendellin's determined look, she fully exerted her power to join him in the purification. Indeed, with Wendellin's help, they easily defeated the spirit. Kurt's body was flung backward and then transformed into a stream of evil spirit that fled away. On the other side, old Jacker and his sycophants were celebrating, thinking they were about to take over Wendellin's domain, believing their plan had been a complete success. Moreover, they started to mock Kurt as a fool for believing Jacker. Jacker only wanted to use Kurt to seize the territory, and it was clear that Kurt would be the first to be eliminated after achieving their goal. While they were happily chatting, Kurt's spirit found them, smashed through a window, and crazily attacked Jacker. The next day, Jacker's mansion was surrounded by the army to conduct an investigation. After a preliminary examination, it was found that Jacker and all those at the party were killed by the spirit. Outside the royal palace, Wendellin, Baranta, and Armstrong were also discussing the matter. They also talked about the fate of Kurt's wife, as there were rumors that the rumors of Wendellin's death were caused by Kurt. Therefore, it was understandable that his family would be shunned and isolated by those around them. Wendellin, recognizing the need for a new arrangement, sought to secure accommodation for them in the capital. Baranta noticed that Wendellin had changed, and despite Wendellin's denial, the difference was clearly noticeable. He reminded Wendellin that he was a true noble, and although Wendellin was not accustomed to the shadowy battles and calculations of other nobles, he had to accept this reality. At dinner, even though everyone else was cheerful, Wendellin appeared more subdued than usual. Later, he sought out Elise to confide in her and asked if she felt he had become a different person. Elise confirmed this and expressed her frustration, which made Wendellin feel that he might not yet have adapted to this world. Wendellin resolved to become an honorable noble, and Elise saw him gradually returning to the person she knew. The next day at the royal palace, Wendellin was among other nobles being recognized by the king for their role in purifying the spirits in the magical forest. Initially, the king granted Wendellin governance over his ancestral land and an adjacent unexplored territory. However, feeling that this reward was insufficient, the king asked Wendellin what he desired. Wendellin immediately requested to decide on the appointments for the 12 vacant positions following the death of 12 nobles by Kurt's spirit. This request displeased the king and the surrounding nobility. The nobles, in particular, reacted strongly, believing Wendellin was asking for too much since such decisions were typically the king's prerogative. Some even suggested replacing the reward with a mage of equivalent skill. When Wendellin tried to explain, Armstrong interrupted him, suggesting that it was inappropriate for Wendellin to make such demands and offered himself as ruler of the area instead. The king declined because he needed Armstrong by his side. Ultimately, the king looked Wendellin in the eye and decided to grant him the lordship, elevating Wendellin to the rank of Earl, and also granted him the authority to appoint officials for the 2 positions. Overjoyed, Wendellin then drew his sword and swore an oath of fealty to the king. Everyone in the hall applauded, not because they disagreed with Wendellin, but because they had performed this act in front of the king to secure such rights for Wendellin. The king also realized that everyone was playing their roles well, except for Armstrong, whose poor acting was blatantly obvious with just a glance. Returning to his domain, Wendellin first met with his sister-in-law and informed her that when Kurt's children were old enough, he would return the titles to them if they wished, without any coercion. Hearing this, Wendellin's sister-in-law was extremely touched and grateful, thanking him as he walked away. The subsequent days marked the beginning of Wendellin's life as an earl. From land reclamation to expanding agricultural areas, these scenes set the opening of the film. Wendellin also realized that everyone wanted him to be the lord of this place, not just the nobles but also his own teammates, creating an atmosphere of immense happiness and joy. This was just the beginning of Wendellin's journey as a lord.